Hello and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog, Arichcomiclife. My name is Richard Gill and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 800 comedians over the last 46 years. My guest today is the wonderful comedian, Mr. Jacob Hawley. Yes! Hello!
Fantastic.
How
Fantastic.
are you?
I'm great, Rich. Thank you for having me on your interview. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Really is. Thank you so much for doing this. It's going to be an interview lasting about 45 minutes to an hour, and we'll go right back to the start and tell me, how did you become a comedian?
I mean, it's something for me that I kind of always wanted to do. I was a fan of comedy since I was really young. Like when I was younger, I was sort of raised on sitcoms that my dad would show me, and then my first introduction to stand up was when I was about 12 or 13. And then sort of straight away after that, I just wanted to do it. I wanted to give it a go. I chose a university degree purely because it had one module that was stand-up comedy. So I put up with 3 years of shit that I didn't really care about, just so I could do the module on stand-up in the final year. And then, I've just been ploughing on since then.
So what year was this when you were at university?
So I went to uni in 2011 until 2014.
Right. And
in 2014 is when I kind of got on the circuit and started doing, like the open mic gigs and those little bits like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So from your university degree, which included stand-up comedy, were you doing gigs as part of the course, or were you doing gigs straight after it?
We sort of did gigs, quote unquote gigs, on the course. So essentially what we did on that for that module, because it was like a theatre course, right?
Yeah.
And so every week we had to write 2 minutes of material, and then every week we'd come and perform it to the rest of the group, which was like 30 people. And then the sort of final assessment at the end of the module was we actually did 10 minutes. Do you know the King's Head in Crouch End?
Yeah, I know it well. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did 10 minutes there. Just people on the course performing, and just people from the course in the audience. So that was like my first. That was like my first ever gig. And then shortly after that, I went and did 5 minutes as part of a kind of normal Thursday night at the King's Head, and then from there, did all the little kind of mini open mic gigs that were around at the time.
Of course, yeah.
And that was sort of how, and it was funny. I was talking to someone else about this the other day, but that was kind of the way that I came up and the way that I sort of built turned it into a job. It was very much the model that people would tell you to do. I very much did it by the book. I did all the open mic gigs. I entered all the new act competitions. I did well in one of them. From that, I got signed to an agent. I did Edinburgh a couple of times, and then it sort of went from there. And I think it's like an interesting thing to think about now. It's sort of talking about that with you there, Rich. That really took me by surprise. I was like, oh wow, it's 7 years I've been doing stand up.
It does fly when you're having fun.
Well, yeah, for most of the part. But I think what's happened in the last year is I've lost a year.
Right.
I haven't really thought about it for a year. In my head, I've been going 6 years, but I was like, oh no, it's 7. But then the last year's kind of been a fallow year. But then, for new acts now, if I was starting comedy if I was to be starting it now, there aren't open mic gigs to be going to. I mean, God knows if there's even going to be pubs, let alone little shows like that. That feels crazy to think about now. The new acts competitions, there weren't any last year in 2020. There aren't going to be any in 2021. Right. Edinburgh, I can't see. If it does happen this year, it won't be. Yeah. I'm the same as you, mate. I can't see it. And so I do think it's very interesting to think. And it's funny. I remember when I started doing stand-up, I used to listen to people like Stuart Lee talking about how he started comedy and how it's so different to my type. And now I feel like another one of those old men sitting there going, "Well, it's so different." You know, sitting there going, "I don't know how people start nowadays. It's such a different landscape."
How old are you, if I can ask?
I'm 20. I'm 29.
There you go. Old.
But you know, it's not. It's not. It's not. I'm not. You know, I'm not old. But I feel old. I've got. You know, I've got a very young daughter who makes me feel old. Yeah. But I think the landscape of live comedy, at least, has shifted so much because of everything that's happened in the last year. That
I agree.
I almost feel like everything that I'm talking about is almost irrelevant now. People be, you know, if a new act were to listen to this and go, "Well, I'll do what Jacob did," they'd be listening to this going, "Well, I can't." None of that is even around anymore. So it's very strange. I have to say, since you know you asked me that there, and I haven't really thought about it in a long time, but it's it's sort of weird. I feel like I'm talking about a world that doesn't exist.
Well, you were saying about the King's Head. My favourite story of going there, I used to go there many times downstairs at the King's Head in Crouch End, and I first saw Harry Hill there 30 years ago, and he brushed past me, jumped up onto the stage, and he said, "I'm really sorry I'm late, ladies and gentlemen. I had to have a testicle brought down." And everybody laughed, and then he said some Derby, and it to this day it was the best opening line I've ever heard. But we used to go all the time downstairs there. We saw Jeff Green and we saw Frank Skinner there. They all played there, so it must have been a very good grounding for you having a pub like that.
It was, and it's still. I mean, again, not so much, you know, in this fallow time, but even a year ago, I'd regularly perform in Crouch End Saturdays and Sundays with Peter Wilson, who runs the gig. You know, he's been there since the beginning. He's championed many young comics, as you say. You know, whether it was Harry Hill, Frank Skinner, or whatever, and it's, you know, it's a beautiful gig. It's a really, it's to me, it's exactly what live comedy should be. You know,
very much
small little basement, low ceiling, 150 people squashed in, mismatched furniture. You know, it's just it's exactly. It's not. I've a couple of times I've done bigger gigs and I've done the big theatres and stuff, and they're lovely and they're really fun to do. And you know, I'm obviously grateful for that. But for me, that's the most exciting thing, is going somewhere like the King's Head. And as an audience member, as much as a performer, I know this is one of the questions you had noted down, but I actually, before I started performing, I used to go and watch a lot of open mic comedy.
Yeah.
Because I just thought that was a smart thing to do. Because I thought, well, you know, my experience before I'd started doing stand-up was very much, I'd seen, you know, big comedians on tour, I'd seen DVDs, but I thought, well, that's not what I'm going to do. You know what I mean? When I start, I'm going to be performing in front of 10 people, so I need to go and see what that looks like. So I actually, for a good year, I went and just watched loads of open mic comedy. I went to the King's Head. Yeah. I went to Angel Comedy. I went to the Comedy Cafe. Yeah. I don't know if you ever went there in Shoreditch. Yeah. You know, just to kind of watch, and
it's fascinating.
I used to love
it. It really is.
I have to say, if I didn't perform stand up, I think that would actually be they would be the nights I'd be most drawn to. Yeah. Is going to watch that. I love watching, because especially some of the new acts are bonkers. They're insane. you get some lunatics. Some of the people that used to turn up. You know, and whether you, as an audience member, whether you're laughing with them or at them, it doesn't really matter. Like,
exactly, yeah.
So I really enjoy that. So yeah, I think places like the King's Head, I do hope that they survive all of this that's going on at the moment, because
I hope so,
for me that's the most. That's the best bit.
If there's one thing I miss, it is going to live comedy. I love going out for a few beers to either the Soho Theatre or the King's Head or the Banana Cabaret at Balham, or Always Be Comedy, of course, and then watching just the best comedy show I can find. When I had the idea for this blog, I went on a half-day writing course, and everybody with me wanted to be reviewers. and the trainer came up to me and said, we can't remember why you're here. And I said, well, I'm not a diarist, I'm not a reporter, I'm not a reviewer, I'm not a critique, I'm a member of the audience out to have a good time, and this blog is designed to be an enthuse for all the people that go out there and actually do it, and go and do it. And I personally can't believe the success of it, but I hope I'm very passionate when I'm talking to you and when I'm writing my blog, and I hope that comes across, because it is the most wonderful thing to experience, and
well, I share your passion, Rich. I have to say, even if I think if I weren't a performer, I would share the same passion. I really adore it as a kind of form, as a way of as a sort of medium. I really it's something I really love, and I don't know about you, but the way that I get with comedy is the way that other people get with music. I'll get a favourite routine, and it's great nowadays that you get people releasing sort of comedy specials on Spotify or on BBC Sounds or whatever, and I'll get my favourite ones and I'll listen to my favourite bit over and over as if it's my favourite song. and I'll be
do that a lot.
I poke it in front of my girlfriend, and I'll go, listen to this, or my friends, I'll say, you have to listen to this. Or I used to, when I first discovered stand-up, I was, as I say, I was about 12, 13, and it was a Ricky Gervais show. I think it was Politics.
I saw that live, yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah.
So I remember I was in a sort of bike gang at the time. Me and my mates would ride our bikes at the sort of skate park and stuff. And someone had a little sort of speaker, and we'd connect our iPods to it and listen to, and everyone would be listening to heavy metal and stuff, and I would unplug it, and I'd plug in Ricky Gervais, and I would try and get people to listen to this.
Oh, that's brilliant.
But that's how much I loved it. That's how much I adored it. I really wanted people to, and I sort of mistakenly thought that other people felt the same way. So it's nice to speak to someone like yourself who shares that passion.
Very, very much so, my friend. When you're on stage, what do you like to talk about? Do you have any themes? Do you have any things that you want to get off your chest? Or how do you go about deciding what you're going to say?
I think it's something that's kind of changed over the years. And when I first started doing stand-up, I mean, as I say, the context within when I first started doing stand-up, I was doing 5-minute sets, and they were kind of in preparation for competitions. And so when you were writing your set and deciding what you wanted to talk about, you were very much thinking, how many times can I say something funny within 5 minutes? How funny can I be within 5 minutes? And so I joked about the most facile topics. And I mean, it was, as I say, it was 2014 when I started doing stand-up, and I was doing jokes about the 2012 Olympics. And I didn't think to myself, they're 2 years old, no one cares. But I sort of had a moment, sort of 18 months in, where I threw away all my material and started again, because I just decided that if I'm going to do this, I just thought I have to be talking about things I really care about.
Yeah.
And that's really, especially in terms of doing longer shows and longer sets, that's really become something that I really think about is doing stuff that I care about, and certainly doing topics that I feel passionate about, whether that might be societal things or personal things. Over the last few years, I've been talking about social class a lot more, because I think it's something that not a lot of other comics talk about the way that I do, and it's something that I care about, and it's something that I think we as a society need to talk about a bit more. I've done a lot of material about drugs in the past, but I've tried to do it from the perspective of someone who isn't just, drawing the same two-dimensional characters. Druggies are wasters, dealers are villains, and everyone else are the good guys. I try and do something a bit more nuanced than that. And then, as I've kind of over the last couple of years fallen in love, started a family, it's very much been talking about that. But I think of my heroes in stand-up, and they're all people who talk about stuff they really care about and topics that they think are really important. It's, as much as I could watch a Michael McIntyre for hours, because I do, he's often referenced as a kind of, he just does jokes about nothing, but he's fantastic, and he's very skilled at that, and he does really hilarious jokes. And I think of someone as Kevin Bridges as kind of been similar, of an observational comic who does incredible stuff about the silly little things in life. But the people you mentioned, the Soho Theatre earlier.
Yeah.
When that opens, I want to be seeing people like an Ahir Shah, a John Kearns.
Brilliant.
People. I mean, someone that I sort of started at the same time as someone like Sarah Keyworth. I've watched Sarah over the last couple of years. Yeah. Wonderful comic, and they do stuff about the things they really care about. And I referenced John there. He's a good friend of mine, but he's to me he's one of the best comics working in the UK.
Yeah.
And John doesn't talk literally on stage. He won't come out and just tell you what he's thinking. You kind of have to piece it together from the mad daft stuff that he says, but it's still important. And if you watch, I was really lucky that I managed to be John's tour support on his last tour, so I watched his last show a few times, and there was one part of the show that was heartbreaking and made me cry. Every night of the tour I would cry. I'd shed a little tear in the audience.
That's fantastic, because you're listening in on what he has to say and you're concentrating as well as getting the laughs.
But people talk about that, especially in terms of modern comedy. There's, nowadays there is kind of a trend for hour-long shows that have a sad bit at the 45-minute mark, and people take the mick out of that. But I love that. I really like that. I love if I can go to a show and feel something, and I think that only comes when the performer's talking about stuff they really care about.
I think that goes as well. If you look at TV sitcoms, if they're very good or really well made sitcoms, you care about the characters. So
100%.
In a way, they're comedy dramas. I'm thinking of like Frasier, Cheers, Only Fools and Horses, Fawlty Towers, Dad's Army.
It's funny.
All very well structured.
Yeah, the ones that you referenced there, I think a lot of people would say that they're straight comedy. They're just traditional sitcoms. I read something that Ricky Gervais said about The Office once, and he said when we sat down and wrote those characters, we didn't think about what made them funny.
Yeah,
we thought about what would make the audience care about them.
Yeah, because
that's what lasts. But I think you're right to point out the kind of trend towards comedy drama, and I love that. I don't know if you watched Mae Martin's sitcom that came out last summer.
Yeah, it was superb.
Oh,
really
wonderful.
Superb. I was just thinking about that, yeah.
It was like a little film.
Yeah.
It was honestly like a little film. It was beautiful. And I love that. And, that's from, she's done a sitcom about stuff she obviously cares about, recovery and addiction and her sexuality and stuff. So I think there are two ways of thinking when you approach comedy as a comedian. You can either just be the silliest, daftest comedian you can be and do something really, just silly. And Harry Hill, like you mentioned earlier, is a great example of that. But then you can also try and be thoughtful and do stuff you really care about. And then I think the real genius is people like John, as I mentioned, Kearns, and
very much so. Yeah,
he does both.
Yeah,
it's silly and it's daft, but it means something. And I think that's what I aspire to.
You mentioned before as well Michael McIntyre, who I first saw in a hut at the Edinburgh Fringe performing to about 30 people, and he was incredible. You could tell then this guy's going to be a superstar. It was just the delivery again, and the sheer putting together of the joke, and then killing the audience with the line time after time after time. He was brilliant. And you also mentioned Kevin Bridges, who I first saw at Always Be Comedy, and I was sitting on the front row, and he said, and he stopped his set after hearing me laugh, and he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Carlisle." And he goes, "Oh," he said, "that's between England and Scotland." He said, I always drop my family off. We always stop at Carlisle so my family can have a piss, and that's the only reference I have to Carlisle. And I'm like, how do I take that? But it was hilarious, and he's right, because you think, well, yeah. But again, it's this observational humour.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to see. To date, what has been your worst comedy gig? Now I've only ever seen you online, and we've never met, unfortunately, and that will happen soon when everything opens up, hopefully. I can't imagine you having a bad comedy gig, because everyone I've seen you do is superb.
Oh, that's very kind of you, Rich. Well, I mean, they do happen.
You must have. Yeah,
they do happen. Do you know a comedian called Mike Wilmot?
Very much. Yeah. I've seen him at the Fringe as well. Yeah.
He's brilliant, Mike.
Yeah. Very gravelly voice, Canadian.
Uncle Mike, as they call him.
Yeah.
I've died in front of Uncle Mike, and that is something you don't want to do, because he will. Wow. That bastard will not let you forget it.
Well, it's all experience.
do you know? He's such a funny guy, Mike. I did a show with him in Gravesend that went really well. Actually, I had a really good time. It was one of my first times on a sort of professional bill a few years ago.
Yeah.
We had a beer afterwards. We got the train back to London together. He bought a bottle of red wine for the train, as he does. Chatted about everything. Talked for a long time. Went our separate ways. I thought, oh, what a lovely guy. I did another show with him a few weeks later, and he didn't recognise me.
No.
And it's no. Listen, it's no. He meets a lot of young comics, and a lot of them, a lot of them kind of look like me, so I don't mind that. And I was probably very quiet and nervous too much, so I don't mind that. But he didn't remember me after spending a few hours together. Wow. The next gig I did with him, it was in Southend. It was at the Cliff Pavilion Theatre.
Yeah.
It was a curry and comedy night. It was horrible. I had the worst 20 minutes of my life. and to that after that, he remembers every second of those 20 minutes.
Wow.
And every time I see him, he goes, God, you remember the Cliff Pavilion? My God.
Oh, that's brilliant.
But that's really sticks out in my mind that night. It was, what's his name? Tom Lucy was on as well. Do you know Tom?
Yeah.
It's great.
Really, and I remember... Bills.
I was watching Tom, and Tom did fine, but Tom came off and was like, "That was awful. That was horrible." He sort of said, "It's going to be bad." And I was wearing this like Adidas tracksuit top. And I just remember afterwards in the green room, often you have a bad gig, you'll go back to the green room, and the other comedians will go, "Oh, it wasn't that bad. It was all right." Mike, I got in the green room. Mike was like, "That was fucking shit." He tells it straight. And then he says to me, he goes, "You can't wear that tracksuit as you walk out the venue." He said, "You've got to take it off." He said, "You can't go back there wearing what you just wore."
Oh, blimey.
So that was painful. But I've noticed in recent years, I really well pre all this, but I don't mind the bad gigs at all anymore. I take them on the chin now. I think I like to think that doing bad gigs is a
good thing.
Is honestly, I think so. The thing is, I think I'd rather be 0 stars or 5 stars. Do you know what I mean? If you're consistently 2 or 3 stars, you're mediocre, you're boring.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're 0 or 5, you're divisive. You're exciting. Yeah. You're exciting.
I think as well that, as I say, to be a better comedian, you have to go through the difficult gigs.
Yeah, we have to take the risks. I think you have to take the risks that come with all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I do think that's I think that's like, I think that's a good sign. If you don't want to be dying all the time.
No, of course, no. How do you cope with any nerves before you go on stage? Do you get nervous?
I used to get very nervous, and I have to say that the first time you saw me, which would have been May last year, when I did the online gig, and that was my first gig in 2 months.
You were superb, mate. You were really good.
Oh, that's very kind, Rich. But I have to say, I was bricking it before that. I was very nervous because I hadn't done it in so long. But I don't... Listen, if there's a secret to overcoming stage fright, I don't know what it is, because for years I was a mess. For the first year or so, I was a mess. I'd be pacing. I'd be I'd be weeing. I'd be doing about 17 wees before I go on stage. I'd be running around. I wouldn't be able to talk. My mouth would be dry out. I had the lot. Whereas now, I think friends of mine anyway find it sort of quite remarkable how I can sort of just sort of wander on, do a longer set, and it's not, it's just experience, isn't it? I don't know if there is a secret to the stage fright thing or anything like that. But I think most people feel this way. But there'll still be times when I'll go, "You go on tonight." There's Rich has come along. He's going to be writing about me for the blog or something. There'll always be a reason. There'll always be a reason to get nervous. But similarly, there's often times now when you just don't care. There's times when you think, well, I don't care what any of these people think. I've done that in the past. I don't care
I suppose as well. It's all down to you as well, because you have to be positive and enthusiastic all the time you go on stage, and you could be having a bad day.
I mean, I've had some. I mean, you've been up to the Edinburgh Fringe yourself, haven't you?
Very, very much, yeah, all the time.
And that's the real one, because it's like you're doing it every day, and you'll wake up in the morning and you'll read a bad review, and then it'll rain all day because it's fucking Scotland, and
it's Scotland,
and you check your bank account and it's empty because you've paid £3,000 for this venue that no one's going to come and sit in, and then you get there and there's 6 people and they're wet and you're wet and no one wants to be there. But as you say, you've still got to go, "Hi guys," blah, 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 come out and be. But so it's very much the job, and it's very. And I know to, again, you learn from experience. I've very much had gigs where I've gone out and I've been grumpy and I've been in a bad mood, and you come off and you go, "Well, that didn't go well," but you think, "Well, of course it didn't." No, who wants that? Who wants to pay to see someone who's in a mood? Like, do you know what I mean? You have to cheer yourself up. So I remember James telling me, because it's James Gill, mutual friend of ours, who runs Always Be Comedy. Yeah. Your comedy brother indeed.
I wish we were related, but we're not.
Well, I'd keep the mystique alive, mate. Who knows? But I remember him telling me some because we've done some corporate gigs for Always Be, and he was saying some advice that Ramesh gave him, which is that when Ramesh used to go and do these corporate gigs, because these corporate gigs, I have to say, the online ones I've done with James have all been really nice, actually, but a lot of the time when you do them in person, they're awful. And apparently Ramesh used to just look at a photograph of his children before going on stage as a reminder of going, well, look, I'm doing this for the money to give those.
It reminds me of the Edinburgh story. We'll move on to Edinburgh, actually, because I go there every year. I'm very fortunate to go there every year, and it's my holiday. I go there for a week, and I go with a load of friends, and I see about 50 shows in a week. I've been going since 2005, and one year, so this would be my 15th year before we all locked down, 2019, 14th, 15th year. 1 year we went, and this must have been typical, because we went to see a comedian who shall remain nameless, and I was there with a friend of mine who was reviewing. There was me and him and a drunken Scotsman who we didn't know in the front row. And the comedian bounded on, and he went, "Hello, ladies and gentlemen, lovely to see you," and realised there was only 3 of us there. And he said, he said, I'm not going to bother tonight. Thank you so much for coming. I'll buy you a drink for coming along. But, it's not worth it doing the 3 people. And this bloke in the front row had his arms folded, and he went, "No, I've paid my £6. I want the hour." And he had to do the hour. And
Did he do it?
The most embarrassing. I felt so embarrassed for the comedian. It was a good show. It was a decent show. But my God, you have to, when you commit to it, you have to do it, I suppose.
I had a friend of mine who did his first Edinburgh in 2019. Fantastic comic, actually. I won't mention his name for similar reasons, but he's someone I'll recommend to you. But he on his first day at Edinburgh, he had 2 people in, and I was there with him before his show, because he's actually, you know, he's a really good friend, and I've been going a couple of years longer than him, and he I was sort of with him before the show, and he said, "Oh my God, there's 2 people. I'm not doing it." And I said, "I'm really sorry, maybe you have to." I said, but the reason I said that, Rich, is because I said to him, the thing is, I said, if you don't do it to 2, if you get 6 tomorrow, you won't do it to 6.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And then if you get, and the problem is, I said if you do it to these 2 and they go away and tell 2 more people each, then that's your 6 for the next day. But I said, unfortunately, that's the job.
Yeah. But,
so
yeah, it's good.
Yeah. That's the reality of it.
I've helped out with comedians who want me to flyer for them at Edinburgh.
Really?
And you know, any way you can build up a group to come and see you, it must be a good thing. You've appeared in shows called Howell in 2018. And Falaraki in 2019 at the Edinburgh Fringe. Tell me about your writing process and where you get your ideas from for show. If you thought of a show, how would you process it?
I mean, so that first one, Howl, that was my sort of quote unquote debut show, and I think it's a very unhealthy thing that we sort of had at the Edinburgh Fringe previously. I don't know whether it'll be the case going forward, where a lot of pressure is put on your debut show. You know, you have to have a strong debut Edinburgh show. You have to do well, which is so stupid because it's obviously going to be your worst one. Of course, it's your worst one.
Well, you're new to it, shall we say?
You've never done it before. Yeah. So why is it important? We should really normalise the idea that you go up and your first one's shit. First one's awful. Of course it is. And you know, you do this thing where what you do, and this is, I think a lot of people do this, and I kind of did this to an extent, is you just pick all your best bits of material, you sort of hammer them all together, and you crowbar bits in, and it, you know, you try and make it make sense and turn it into a coherent thing, and naturally it isn't, because you know, they're just bits that you've thought of over the first 3 or 4 years of your career. And so it was, you know, it went all right that year, but it was you know, I do if I could go back and talk to my previous younger self, I'd say just write something new, just do something new, and if it's shit, it's shit, but you'll learn. In the second year, I went way too far the other way. I tried to do I basically tried to do a Kitson show. I tried to do two stories that I told in parallel that would kind of intertwine, and you know, one from fucking ridiculous.
I was being kind.
it was. And do you know what, Rich? It's funny you mentioned critics earlier. I'm someone, I read every review. I will read every review. I've got a Google alert set up. It tells me every time my name pops up anywhere.
Wow.
I read every review. Do you know what? Because, and listen, there's times you'll get. And you know, listen, by and large, I've been reviewed quite nicely, you know, 4 stars here, 4 stars there, a couple of 3s, but, you know, 3 isn't a bad review, it's fine, right? But if you're getting reviewed by a load of students up in Edinburgh, take that with a pinch of salt. They're a load of students, they're learning, you know, if you're going to get reviewed by Bruce Desso, for example, who writes for the Evening Standard, or I've been reviewed by the guy who does the comedy for the Sunday Times. Can't remember his name, but you know, Steve Bennett from Shaw, for example.
Somebody,
I give their opinions a lot of credence because they watch comedy every day of their lives. They know my contemporaries. They know the people that inspire me. And I read Steve Bennett's review of my most recent show that I did at Soho Theatre, which was that Falaraki show. Gave it 3.5 stars, you know, read very nicely, but he said, you know, the structure is a bit clunky. And I thought, yeah, it was clunky because I was trying to do 2 fucking shows at once. Of course it's clunky. Like it was really over ambitious. It was way too much. You can't jump backwards and forwards in time. It's not a film. Do you know what I mean? I'm not sat I'm not sat in a digital FX studio trying to jump forward, but it's me stood on a stage in a pair of shorts. Keep it simple. So It's quite sad actually, because I was writing a show this time last year when everything got cancelled. I was writing a show called Bump, which was about me trying to decide whether I want to be a parent or not, and whether I think it's right to bring children into such a broken world, with the kind of added caveat that me and my partner had a failed pregnancy. She'd had a miscarriage the year previous, and so that had kind of altered my thinking a little bit, but also that we were now expecting our first child, who was born in August, which was, so I was going to kind of do an Edinburgh show in reverse. I was going to do the sad bit at the start and the happy bit at the end. And I thought, I really think that would have been the best. I think that was going to be my best show. I think that was going to be something, you know, I'd really worked hard. I really thought it was a good bit of work. And so hopefully I'll get to do that again. But yeah, you really look back at your previous stuff and you do learn your lessons. You know, the first one, it was just about crowbarring in whatever I thought was funny. And then the second one, I was trying to write a film whilst stood in an attic in Edinburgh. So you learn your lessons.
What's very impressive about you when I've seen you online is that you're very engaging, you're very enthusiastic, you're determined to make an audience laugh, and every time I see you, it's new. There's either a new routine in there or the entire set's new. So that's extremely encouraging, and I'm just hoping for great things for you with all the carry on.
Oh, thanks. The thing, I guess, you know, I'm trying to think of when you've seen me, and it's been difficult with the online stuff, because the thing
I've
is,
only ever seen you online.
And this is it. Usually, I do most of my writing. It sounds bizarre, but I do my writing on stage. I do my writing. I try and think of stuff in the moment and write that way. I'm not great at sitting with a notepad in my flat. I have to be at the gig. So it's been very hard. I mean, I did a Radio 4 special in March, and I basically had to write that. You know, a lot of the material that I ended up recording for that, I've never performed in front of an audience.
Right.
I've still never done it in front of an audience, a lot of it, because I wrote it in, you know, December, January, February. There weren't any gigs. I couldn't try it.
Yeah.
So I just had to record it as a stand, you know, down. I recorded it on Zoom.
Yeah.
And that was that. So so yeah.
That leads me into my next question. You've also done a stand-up special called on Radio 4. It was called Jacob Hawley's Welcome to Britain. That's right, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that was the first one I did. I recorded that in 2019.
Right.
That was a kind of adaptation of my first Edinburgh show, which was called Hawley.
Right.
Which was about kind of patriotism and nationalism in the UK. And then I did another one this year called Class Act, which came out last month.
So
and that's about social.
Say again, sorry.
That was about social class, the second one.
Right. So, are there any differences, do you think, to appearing on radio as opposed to live stand-up?
Well, in terms of those shows, they were supposed to be, you know, stand-up specials, and the first one was actually recorded in front of an audience. That was actually recorded at a top secret comedy club.
Know it well, yeah.
Beautiful place.
Yeah.
But the second one, the second one, yeah, as I said, I recorded it over Zoom, and it's a mad experience. You know, I recorded it at a place called the Mildmay Club in Newington Green, which is like the oldest working men's club in London. Huge room. You could have fit 500 people in there. It's completely empty. I'm stood on this massive stage. There's no one there. There's 3 people. There's the producer and 2 cameramen. I've just got headphones on, and I can 100 people on the Zoom who I'm performing to. I can hear them, but I can't. It's like performing to ghosts.
Right.
It's honest, because it's not like the Always Be comedy where I can see you in your house.
Yeah.
I couldn't see anyone, so I'm just. So that's a really bizarre experience, and I think the main difference you've got to consider, especially when you're doing Radio 4, is that you're performing to a certain kind of audience. You know, you're performing to someone who's probably quite well educated, quite middle class, and that comes with its own considerations. I like doing that. I don't mind that. I like it all, really. I don't mind whether I'm performing in a trashy little comedy club in the basement, or whether it's for Radio 4. But I do think
good on you.
You obviously you have to be considerate of who you're performing to, you know. And I think the tastes of a Radio 4 audience. So I'll maybe try and use a few bigger words. I'll get a dictionary out before going on stage and make sure I know some.
You're
some
putting yourself
words
down, my friend. We're all living in strange times. It's been a horrible, awful year, awful time. How have you found online gigs again as opposed to stand-up? Have you done many of them? What do you think of them?
I've done a good handful. As I say, some with Always Be Comedy, some for a few other promoters. And the main thing I would say is I have to say I was very sceptical before doing an online gig. I waited a good couple of months before doing one. And listen, you've probably seen as much online comedy as anyone in the last year, Rich. You'll know yourself. It is not the same as being in a comedy club, but it is 100% the next best thing.
Yeah.
It's an absolute credit to the people that put those online shows on, because not only do they keep people like yourself entertained, but they keep people like me in work and in pocket.
Yeah.
And I can't speak highly enough of people like our mutual friend James and people who run all these online gigs, because it's so innovative, and I think it's so selfless of them to run these gigs, because you know, usually there'll be 1-2 people behind these gigs, and they'll be entertaining hundreds of people at home, and they'll be keeping a handful of comedians paid and working and being creative. And I think that deserves a huge amount of credit. And so I have not got a bad word to say about online gigs. I think they are a brilliant thing. I think they're a wonderful. Consequence of this mad little period. I think it's a shame we've had to do them, but I think it's a real credit to the people that run them for being so innovative in the past year.
I totally agree. I think they are a super substitution for the real thing. If we didn't have online comedy, I don't know what I would have done, because I'd have just been looking at four walls. But for me, you can't beat obviously live, because you're in an enclosed room, anything can happen, and you're there on the moment with those group of people. It's fascinating to watch a live set from either an up and coming comedian or an established comic. But even the online ones, I mean, when they first started, there was no audio, so I was sitting here laughing at the walls, and I thought I was going to be taken away. You know, it was like, because the laugh's apparently very loud. Oh, you nearly went then, but there you go. It's
just my phone telling me I've got 20% left.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, we are nearly done. I really hope the live gigs are back very, very soon. I'm sure there will be. Can you tell me who your favourite comedians are, past and present, please?
I think from the past, my dad showed me a lot of Jasper Carrot growing up, and I really enjoyed a bit of Jasper Carrot.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Seen him
Love
2 or 3 times. It's great. Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to see the Big Ween a few times.
Wow.
Twice, which, you know, for me is the most successful British, or for me, one of the most innovative British comedians you'll ever see.
Yeah. Wow, that's brilliant.
I saw him at the Apollo.
I think
3
I was
years
there
ago,
with
mate.
you. So I've seen him there. Yeah. He's just amazing, you know, because he can pick anything up and just run with it. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, and it was sad seeing him obviously unwell as he was.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it was a real treat to see him. And present, I think I mentioned Kevin Bridges earlier, and I think I honestly think Kevin is one of the best in the world at stand-up. And I think on an international level, if you were to speak to an American comedy fan and they were to say, we've got the Bill Burrs and we've got Sarah Silverman and people like that, I think you can hold up Kevin Bridges, and I don't think there's anyone who can hold a candle to him.
Totally agree. I totally agree. The reason I asked the question is that there's a section in my blog called The Ones That Got Away, And there's 25. I've written 25 comedians who have either passed on or I haven't had a chance to see. And for me, top of the tree were Morecambe and Wise. They're the reason why I do comedy. Yeah. My first ever gig at the age of 8, a family gig, was Les Dawson at Scarborough. And a year later I saw Tommy Cooper and I was hooked. That was just amazing.
Oh mate, but Tommy Cooper, that's that's
the curtains opened and he's lying on a bed and nothing happens, and there's one woman laughing in the crowd and it trickles round, so everybody's laughing. And after about 10 minutes, having not done anything, he pops his head up. He goes, "What? Has somebody come on?" There's another level where you can twiddle your glasses or you can have your fares or not do anything, and folk laugh at you. And I think it's
a real skill, isn't it?
It's extraordinary, and I think the most recent one of those for me is Peter Kay. He can do no wrong. But
just funny bones, isn't it? Just natural funny bones.
I first saw him on a bill of 5 acts. And he was 4th on the bill, and I laughed so hard at him I missed the 5th act, and I said to him, "Mate, he's going to be a superstar." Just before we go, is there anything else you would like to say? Where can you be found on social media? Have you got any online gigs coming up, more books, or any podcasts?
I will have a new podcast series coming to BBC Sounds soon, but I can't say too much about it yet.
Exciting.
But yeah, if anyone's keen and wants to give it a listen, my most recent stand-up special, Class Act, is on Radio 4, and I'm really proud of it. So if you just go on the BBC Sounds app and search my name, you'll see it comes up. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's, as I say, very strange way that it came to exist, but I'm very proud of it nonetheless.
Well, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And
yeah, absolutely.
I for one can't wait to come and see you live on stage. Never mind online.
It won't be long. I think a couple of months, then we'll be around.
We'll be back to normal. As I say, thank you so much for your time and all the best to you.
Top man, Rich. Thank you very much.
Thank you, mate.